Hey, today we have got a guest who literally turned the fear of speaking into one of the most lucrative skills that any entrepreneur could master. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode. We got a really cool guest this time and a really cool topic. We're going to talk about the skill of communication, more specifically, the skill of speaking, professional speaking, and in particular for all you entrepreneurs out there and all you solo entrepreneurs, this is whether you have to make a presentation to the board of directors, you're creating a PowerPoint presentation that you want to talk to investors about raising money for your company. You got to speak to all the employees, or they actually want you to get up at a convention or a conference and make a speech. This really is one of the most lucrative skills. I believe speaking and writing, you guys know if you followed the podcast for a while, we've talked about skill stacking and how when you can combine good writing skills, good speaking skills, some of the other skills we've talked about, it really makes you more valuable and more successful. And there could be nobody better qualified to give you expertise in this area than Joel Weldon, our guest today. So, first of all, Joel, it's just great to have you on the show.
Well, thank you, Randy.
And for you guys watching and listening, this is one of the original gangsters of the speaking business. Okay. More than 3,000 page speeches. He has coached more than 10,000 speakers. He's one of my co members in the Speaker Hall of Fame, although he was in there many, many years before I even heard of it. He's been doing professional presentations for 4 decades plus. So he really is a mad genius at what he does. So again, it's just great. We've both been members of the National Speakers Association a long time, connected at the last event. So just getting together with you again, seeing you. I know I'm going to see you in person next week, but having you on the show, it's a real delight.
Well, thank you. It's a delight to be here, especially after all these years of following what you've done and building prosperity. And as you're listening to this, you're here because that's important to you, whatever that prosperity means to you, financially, emotionally, spiritually, and your ability to connect with other people. As Randy said, it's communication. And, we're talking about Hall of Fame and experts. Probably one of the greatest experts in their field of prosperity is Warren Buffett, one of the wealthiest men in the world. And he said many years ago, you can increase your value by 50% by just learning communication and public speaking skills. And if you know anything about Buffett, his annual report that he would give every year in the Midwest, there would be thousands of people packing an auditorium to hear every word he said. And he was effective at communicating and building a fantastic prosperity life. And that's why you're here too. So, what
Yeah.
would you like to talk about, Randy? What are some of the things that, as you're
Well,
listening, you'd
yeah,
want to
I
know
want
if
to
you were
get
here?
into your journey because you are self-described as you began as the worst speaker anyone could ever hear. You had the sweaty palms. You were because I know we've got people watching or listening who have that. There's the old joke about they'd rather be in the coffin than given, the eulogy. We've all heard that, but that's real. There's a lot of people who are petrified of that. How did you go from that fear to ending up in the Speaker Hall of Fame and really becoming just an icon in the profession?
Well, that's a great way to start. So, as you're listening, just think about when you were in high school. As you're listening or watching this interview, what were you like in high school? Were you outgoing? Did you have a lot of friends? Did you love getting up in front of the group and talking? Were you in the school play, maybe on the debating team? And when you hear somebody as a professional speaker, that's what most people think. Oh, they probably were like a child prodigy. They were in the plays, they were on the team, they were elected school officers. Well, that wasn't my experience at all. In 4 years of high school, I never stood up in front of the class and spoke. I took a failing grade. If you had to give an oral book report, I took a failing grade rather than speak. And my inability to communicate made me so shy and self-conscious and had very few friends. And I was happy, but I wasn't communicative and I didn't have any confidence to do that. And maybe you can relate to that as you're listening to this. So I just earned my living with my hands. I was good at building things, became a carpenter. I had an opportunity to go to college on a full scholarship from a golf course that I caddied at. I mean, I turned it down because I didn't think I was smart enough to go to college. So I went in the construction business, banging nails, digging ditches as a carpenter and a construction worker, and had a life-changing experience when I was 26 and got into sales, failed miserably. And after, just think, imagine you're selling something. Randy, I know you've had sales experience. And as you're listening, maybe you sold something. Well, this was selling encyclopedias door to door in New York for World Book Encyclopedia in 1967. And I set a company, I couldn't even talk to people, but I set a company record. I made over 400 sales calls and one sale in 4 months. Not a very good closing average. And my manager, Vernon Cavill, when he saw this, he said, you're the worst salesperson I ever hired, and you'll never make it doing anything unless you change the way you think about yourself. And I know you know what I'm going to say next because it's happened to so many people. And he reached into his drawer and he handed me a record called The Strangest Secret by Earl Nightingale. And I didn't know who Earl Nightingale was. I didn't know what The Strangest Secret was. He said, Joel, listen to this. And maybe you've had a life experience as you're listening to this. So one turning point, somebody says something or does something, gives you a book, says something to you. Well, that strangest secret was like the light coming on in a darkened room. And I heard it. And if you don't know the strangest secret, it's simply this, that you become what you think about. And after hearing Earl Nightingale's amazing message, and at that time was the largest selling recording ever made of a spoken word message, and still is today in 2025. And as a result of that, I decided to go back and learn how to sell. And I was able to do fairly well. And then they made me a manager. And this is where speaking comes in. And then I moved to Arizona from New York and had my first meeting with 17 people, most of them school teachers who were selling World Book, door to door on a commission. So imagine you're in Tempe, Arizona, Randy, you're in this room and there's 16 other people and you, and this young guy. Now remember, I was 28 years old now. This is 2 years after I heard The Strangest Secret. And I'd never spoken in front of a group. And I give this presentation and you leave with everybody. And as you're standing in the lobby of the Holiday Inn in Tempe, right across from Arizona State University, you see an older man go back into the room where the speaker was. So this guy walks in and he says, Joel, would you like some feedback on your presentation? Now, Randy, I'm sure in all the years that you've spoken, you've had people ask you that. Would you like some feedback on your presentation? And of course, they said yes. He said, well, this is the worst meeting I have ever attended in my entire life. And you, young man, are the worst speaker I have ever heard in my whole life. Now, if somebody told you that, Randy, when you just started, what would you have done? Now, you're a strong, you don't shy away from confrontation, but I just started crying. I mean, I just burst into tears, and he was much taller than me. He looked down, he said, stop crying. You're not a baby. You're a grown man. I'm going to fix you. So I kind of wiped the tears away. And I mean, just imagine how you would feel as you're listening if you were doing that. If you aren't comfortable speaking, you get up an opportunity, you get an opportunity to do it, and you fail miserably. And then this guy calls you out on it. So I wiped the tears away. I looked at him. I said, what do you mean, fix me? He said, Tuesday morning, 6:30, you're going to be at Brad's Coffee Shop here in Tempe, and you're going to go to a Toastmasters club, and we're going to teach you how to speak. So I showed up that next Tuesday, September 4th, 1969. And My life changed at that meeting. I had no idea that speaking was a learned skill and that if you knew certain things, you could get better at it. And that was another light in a darkened room. So think about your experience. What are these dominoes in your life when something happens and tips over one way? It causes something else to fall and another to fall and another to fall. The strangest secret was the first, that we become what we think about, and then learning how to sell, but not knowing how to speak. 5 years later, I was at the Disneyland Hotel in front of 2,000 people at the world's final of Toastmasters International, placed in the top 3 in the world. Now, how could that be? Because speaking is a learned skill. And as you're listening to this podcast or watching it, that's true for you. That when you were born, you didn't know how to type. You didn't know how to play golf. You didn't know how to ride a bicycle. You didn't know how to bowl. You didn't know how to do anything. You've learned all those things and put speaking in that same category. It's a learned skill. And if you learn certain basic things and you have a message that's worth sharing, it's amazing what you can do. So that was the turning point. And that's why I'm still an active member in Toastmasters.
Yeah, amazing, amazing story. What do you think's a misconception? Because people think, okay, so I got to hit the stage the right way. I hit my mark. I got my tie or my suit or whatever this way. How am I going to get this audience to get me a standing ovation? They approach it with that way. What's the misconception? What are they not getting about what they're really supposed to be accomplishing when they hit that stage?
Well, everything you said is what most people think about. And to me, that's the completely opposite thing because it has nothing to do with you. And that's what I've learned in my 51-year career as a professional speaker. It's not about you. It's about your audience. This podcast is not about Joel and Randy. We already know these things. It's you as you're listening or watching to this. That's what this is for. I'm not talking to Randy. I'm talking to you as you're listening. Maybe you're driving in your car. Maybe you're sitting in your living room. Maybe you're out doing some exercises, or maybe you're at the gym and you're hearing this podcast and you're thinking, what can I do? Well, that's the key. If you get yourself out of the way, that's why you don't have to become nervous. People are nervous when they're self-conscious.
Right.
Self-consciousness is thinking about, how do I look? Is my suit okay? Is my clothes okay? Is my hair, are they going to like me? Are they going to laugh if I say something funny? Are they going to understand my stories? That's all backwards. It's, what does the audience need to know? And that's what Randy and I were talking about before you showed up. What can you, as a prosperity seeker, gain by being an even better communicator and speaker? Well, what Warren Buffett said is true. You could increase your value 50% by just being a better speaker and communicator. And this would be my first suggestion for you. Get yourself out of the way. And just think how most people open a talk. And Randy, you've heard thousands of speakers, and I would bet 95% of them begin with one word: I. I'm so excited to be here. I was looking forward to this. I couldn't wait for them to start the meeting so I could share with you these wonderful ideas that I've gotten. No one cares. That's my philosophy. No one cares about you. So what if your opening was always about your audience? So I'm going to give you 3 words you can open any presentation with. You're here because. And that's what I said to you when we first met. You're here because you're interested in prosperity. And hopefully you're going to get one good idea in this podcast that you can make applicable to your ability to communicate and speak. But if you always opened about you're here because you're a member of the National Speakers Association. You're here because you're a doctor and you're attending this conference to see if the holistic approach to medicine can transform your medical practice. So that's one little thing to think of. When you say you're here because, you can't go into I. Not that you can't say I or me or mine, but if you were to transcribe most people's presentations, That's the predominant pronoun. So here's an assignment for you. Look at emails you've written to clients or potential clients or customers. Just look at any email where you've written to somebody, take a pen, print out that email, circle I's and U's. As you look at the I's, look at that sentence and see how could I have eliminated the I and make it about you? And what does the ordinary business email start with? I was excited because I have so many great ideas to share with you, Randy, on how your podcast can be even better. And I was hoping to get, those are all I statements. So I don't know, for the people watching, I wrote, this is the word right here. This is the one that you want to focus on. So if you just take that sentence, your podcast is excellent, Randy. What if you had one idea that could take your podcast to an even higher level? Would that be something you would be interested in? There's not a single
I
I
was
in that
a
sentence.
what do you call that? Like not apprentice, but when you work for free for a company and
Oh,
they what is that?
not an apprentice, but what's the word they use now?
Somebody will put it in the comments.
Yeah,
Anyway, you know
yeah.
what I mean? Like you're
I know
the
exactly what you mean.
unpaid intern. I was an intern
Intern, yes.
for Senator Bob Graham here in Florida when I was very young. And so they eventually had me writing the letters for him. And so they gave me a stack. Here's some things that the senator needs to respond to constituents. So I wrote about 10 letters and I gave it to the lady who was my supervisor. And she said, Randy, all of these letters start with I. It was in Bob's voice, but still I, right? She said, the senator never sends out any correspondence that starts with with the word I. And later, when I became a copywriter, that was still the greatest message I ever had is don't ever start any website, sales letter, email, text, anything with the letter I, because it's always going to be about me instead of about them, the reader, the listener, the whatever the case. So one of your core ideas is making your message impossible to be misunderstood. Um,
Yes.
Practical application. How do people best do that?
Well, as you're listening without knowing anything about you, whether you're an experienced communicator or new, whether you're a longtime entrepreneur or you're the first year of being a solo entrepreneur, here's your biggest problem. You know too much. Even if you're brand new at what you're doing, you have immersed yourself in whatever product, service, or industry you're in. You have passion about it, or you wouldn't be an entrepreneur. And you have certain things that are automatic in your brain. Now, Randy, you have such a big problem of knowing so much because you've had so much experience. And I talked to Randy earlier when we were talking about the 6 words Randy will never hear as a speaker. And these are 6 words you're never going to hear as an entrepreneur if somebody invites you to talk to a trade association or a business group or a Kiwanis club or whatever it is. Talk as long as you want. And I said to Randy, if I said that to you right now, Friday afternoon, tell me everything you've learned about business, entrepreneurship, being prosperous, having a wonderful life, being an outlier, go. Now, this is Friday of next week. He's still going. He's not even halfway there. I think we could make it through a month of you talking nonstop without running out of material. So this is one of the challenges. How do you make it impossible not to be misunderstood? Is you have to make it relevant to your audience. What do they need to know about your subject? They don't need to know everything. Think about when you bought a car as you're listening. Maybe you're in your car right now. That's the second biggest purchase most people make after their home. And yet, if somebody was to ask you, what's the axle ratio on the rear tires? What are the compression PSI on your cylinders? Most people have no idea. There are so many things about that automobile you don't know. Whether it's a SUV or an electronic vehicle or a conventional truck, whatever it would be, There are thousands of things salespeople could talk about. Yet experienced salespeople know people make a buying decision about a car because, the seat is really comfortable and it's got a big screen and I love the sound system and the color is just perfect. I think I'll take it. And that's it. And that's what you need to think of if you're communicating to somebody about your business, why they should buy your products or services. If you're a consultant, why they should hire you. What do they need to know about what you're talking about? Second thing is, what are they afraid of or concerned about? And third is, what are the positives or the victories? And that's called the NFV formula: needs, fears, victories. And as you're listening, in answer to Randy's question, how do you make sure that your message is never misunderstood or confused? Number one, talk about things they need to know in reference to what you're talking about, things that concern them or worry them or keep them up at night, fears, or the positives, the victories that they already have expressed about that product or service. Like just listening to you, that would be a victory. They showed up to come to your session about investing in whatever, if it's an investment seminar. So that's one thing. And then because you're talking to a specific audience, use words they understand, which are not acronyms, not buzzwords unique to a business or an industry. And this is where your biggest challenge comes in. Because you're so immersed in what you're doing, these things are so clear in your mind. You know all the acronyms, you know the buzzwords, you know the little expressions. And yet, when you leave that group of experts, they're unknown. And I think if you think back to speakers that you've heard in the past, the simpler you can keep things, the clearer you can keep it, and the more specific to them, you won't be misunderstood. You'll be understood. Does that answer it, Randy?
I love it. Yes. So, you know where I want to go next? There was this secret event that took place in somewhere around Phoenix, around a swimming pool. A few guys got together. They were professional speakers and they had this quiet secret meeting and they said, we need to work together. We need a lot of more people need to hire professional speakers. They don't know we exist. We need like a membership or an association or something. And this is almost 50 years ago, I believe. So these guys sit around the pool, they create what becomes the National Speakers Association. Bill Gove is the first president of it. They end up getting chapters everywhere in the world. They ultimately create the Speaker Hall of Fame. They turn speaking, professional speaking, into a profession. Well, many people probably don't know. You were one of those guys around that swimming pool. So just take us there. Who is there? What happened? You know, what, because we've seen what it turned into, but almost nobody knows I know because Bill Gove became a very, very dear friend of mine before he passed away. So, but most people don't even know that meeting happened. As the insider who is there, what could you share with people about how this whole profession of professional speaking really started with you guys around that swimming pool?
Well, that's a very good question. But as you're listening, you're probably not interested in becoming a professional speaker. But let's use that as a metaphor. Just imagine we go back, and I don't know what year it would be. We're going to have a little meeting about Bitcoin. It probably would be 2010. Cyber currency. Bunch of people sitting around a swimming pool talking about cyber currency, and nobody really knows what they're talking about. Now, and I think back in 2014, a Bitcoin was about $240. And I had a friend who heard about it then, put 2 grand in it because he thought, well, look, I can lose 2,000. And now I know it's over 100,000. That's a pretty good return. A couple of hundred for 100,000. That's what's happened in speaking. In 1974, when we officially founded National Speakers Association, the year I became a professional speaker, there were a handful of speakers. There was no industry, but Cavett Robert was the leader of our group, sitting at the Camelback Inn Sunday after church. We would go to Camelback Inn to have lunch together with a handful of speakers. And I think at that time, and this is kind of a guess, there were under 50 professional speakers in America. Most of them were like Ira Hayes, who worked for National Cash Register. And he
Yes.
was sort of like a spokesman for them. And they would pay Ira Hayes to go to ABC Company in Detroit and give a talk at their banquet. And the company would pay, and he would give a little commercial about National Cash Register and getting a cash register for all your stores. And he would monetize his salary and his travel expenses by selling the company product. And General Motors had speakers too. And that was kind of the industry until Cavett showed up, and he was an attorney, and he just had this dream that people should hear from some of these amazing people. Remember, there was no internet then. There was no YouTube videos. Cassettes hadn't really started very well. They were still out there, but Earl Nightingale's first message was on a record, not on a cassette. So CDs hadn't been invented, no DVDs. The way you spread ideas was having a meeting. And think about your industry, whatever it is you're in, maybe you're in the infancy of it. Look at what AI is. Imagine if 10 years ago somebody said, "So are you using AI?" People wouldn't have, what are you talking about? Even though we know artificial intelligence started 50 years ago, the concept, it didn't become a tool for us until the last few years. And now look at what's happening with that. And that's why you've got to just be open to new ideas. And that's who we attracted in 1973 and 74 and 75, those first 3 years of the National Speakers Association. People who wanted to grow, who wanted to share, wanted to be around other people, who didn't think they had all the answers, but were willing to help each other. And that's how it started. And I believe the first numbers were, it was certainly under 100. And I was program chair, I think, for the second year. And, and there were under 100 people at the Camelback Inn when we had that meeting. And now, and we've hit a high, what, of 4,000 at one time, just in the national speakers. And that's a fraction of people who are, quote, professional speakers. And now it's with YouTubes and all of these other things and the TEDx talks with thousands of people are getting experience. It's a wonderful thing to say happening. So that's how it really started and expanded.
Well, you should have great pride in how your baby has grown up, really.
Well, I was a follower. I wasn't a creator. I was just getting started, but
You were at that first meeting. You were there from the get-go. You have been very instrumental, very influential in the growth and development of the National Speakers Association and all those satellite all over the world. I mean, they have them in Ireland and Britain and Germany and Australia and Malaysia and I mean all over the world. So you should be really, really proud.
well, thank you.
What do you think? So the guy, the gal who wants to promote their business, they're not a speaker, but they know, hey, okay, I don't want to be the next Norman Vincent Peale, but I want to know how I can be a better presenter, how I can convey my ideas to influence change, to make impact. Other just off the cuff ideas, suggestions you have for them?
Sure, a couple of things. Well, first of all, accept these three premises. This is the basis of everything I've learned in over 51 years of doing this. Number one, we already talked about this. It's a learned skill. Speaking and communicating effectively is a learned skill like anything else. And the more effort you put into it, the better you're going to get at it, whether that's golf or tennis or playing pickleball. Second premise is, and this is one that some people don't accept, be yourself. It is not about acting or performance. And speaking in some cases have turned into what I call performance speaking. How do you use your voice and your body? That's what I would call acting. And the definition, Randy, and as you're listening, wherever you are right now, you know what an actor is. Somebody who has a unique ability to pretend they're somebody they're not. So Meryl Streep, one of the greatest actresses ever. When you watch a Meryl Streep movie, she's not Meryl. She's a French woman. She's an old lady. She's the president of some company. She becomes somebody she's not. Why in the world, as an entrepreneur, would you want the ability to pretend you're not who you are? So somebody hears you at a meeting, they come and see you and they say, well, gee, you seem so different than when I met you last week. Oh, that was the speaking me. No, you be you. And that's what I loved about Randy. And Randy and I were talking about this. We haven't gotten to know each other personally until really recently, but I've known about him. And that's what I've always remembered hearing. Randy was Randy. He doesn't become somebody else. He's not trying to imitate another speaker. Isn't it wonderful that God made just one of us? There's no one else like you. So if you're dull, boring, and monotone, that's how you should speak. And I have clients that are so successful as speakers that are dull, boring, and monotone, but we build it into the presentation. So I wrote one recently for an introduction. His name, just call him Bob. You know, Bob is going to talk about X, Y, Z, and he's had this many years of experience. And by the way, if you look up in a dictionary, if you can find a paper dictionary, look up the word boring, you will see Bob's picture. He's probably the most boring speaker you will ever hear. So what we've asked the audience to do today, before Bob comes up and talks to you for a 1 hour, and I'm telling you, he's boring, people fall asleep. So if the person next to you starts nodding off, it's your job to nudge him and wake him up. And for those of you, 20 of you in the front row, if Bob starts to fall asleep while he's talking, you get up on stage and wake Bob up. Please help me welcome Boring Bob. Well, when I've used that, they give him a standing ovation, and he walks out with a notebook like an accountant and puts it on the lectern and just starts mumbling. But what he says is so powerful,
Right.
and so impactful that people listen. And if you remember Jim Rohn and Earl Nightingale, if you ever saw them speak live, they read their talks. They stood behind a lectern and read. But what they said changed lives. So that's premise number 2 for you. First, it's a learned skill. Be yourself. And if you have things that can distract, an accent or some behavioral thing, get it out front so it's not an issue. And the third one is, we already talked about it. It's all about your audience. It's not about you. And an audience feels that if you're there to help them on whatever subject you're talking about, they're going to be into this. So those are the things that I think could help you be better. And then there are little things you could do, like certain words. So if I said to you, Randy, here's a system that's going to help you make more money. Here's a system that can help you get in better shape. Does that sound pretty good?
Yeah, system is that magic word there.
Well, it is, but look at the first part. This is a system to help you make more money because you're probably not doing very well financially. This is a system to help you get in better shape because, Randy, you're probably not really in very good shape now. But if you would add, anytime you use verbally or in writing the words more or better, put in the word even. Randy, there's a system that will help you earn even more money. Now we know you're really doing well, but there's another level. Randy, there's a system that would help you get in even better shape. We know you're in great shape, but there's another level of fitness that you could achieve. So
It's
look at
funny
your
now. See,
emails.
as a copywriter, I would say the system is even more important because just because of the market today, we're so much. The guy spends an hour on TikTok, he gets 800 ads on how to get in better shape. He's on YouTube. He gets 100 videos on how to make more money. So they're just, this is all bullshit. Oh, another how to have washboard abs in 10 minutes thing. But when you have that system, the framework, the process, I think that's what kind of helps cut through the other clutter as well. Because now I believe you can help me make more money because you have a system for doing it. Or I believe you can help me get those washboard ads because you have a framework for it. It gives you credibility, but I certainly get your point totally about those
Well, if I may,
more is
let's
better.
here's an idea that can help you earn more money. Here's an idea. All right, here's a tool. I shouldn't have used system with a copywriter like you that picks up on words so quickly and makes them even better. But you're absolutely right. That was not a very good choice of the words. And there's an example of not being crystal clear. It could have been even better. You know, here's
Yeah, but
something to help you make
you
more.
got the point across. I
So
mean,
the point of it is elevating the people you're talking to. You want prosperity, don't you? That's why you're listening. You want to be even more prosperous as a result of tuning into Randy's podcasts and listening to people who have ideas on health and fitness and wellness and business strategies. That's why you're tuning in. So you can be even better. So just think of that. That's the power of little words that can make a difference.
something else you've talked about, kind of the core, one of the core things I've heard from you over the years is the winding river metaphor. Somebody's looking at this, oh my God, how do I get to where I want to be in 10 years? Can you talk about your winding river metaphor that you use for that?
Well, you've really got some background on me. I got to be careful. Well, well, this was a story that, and here's something to think of. I'm going to tell you the Winding River story. So the suggestion is when you're talking to somebody, whether you're one on one or whether you're in a group situation, as you're listening, open with the point of the story. So my mind works this way. When you said that, Randy, the first thing this thing thought about, no one cares about the Winding River unless it's relevant to them. And that's what the point makes. So the point of the Winding River story is this. How do you achieve your goals? And I made a list. That was episode 569, where you were alone and you talked about a system, a strategy of controlling your thinking to achieve your goals. Is that correct, Randy?
All right.
And
Yeah.
it was very good. Okay. So this is a metaphor on what you could do to achieve your goals. So what if you use that as a speaking skill? Before you tell a story, tell the audience the point. You might be thinking that this is going to be difficult for you to achieve the prosperity you want in your life by making better investments. So here's an example of why persistence is important as you grow your financial wealth. To not give up too soon. Okay, now you tell the story, but we know why we're listening. It's like if you went to Manhattan and you went on a bus without knowing where the bus is going. Eventually, you're going to, I don't know if it's going where I want to go. I better get off. So you look at the sign on the bus. That's what a story can do. By opening with the point, you're putting a sign on the bus so your audience knows where they're going. So think about yourself. I'm sure you probably set a goal. Well, maybe at some time in your life you set a goal and you didn't achieve it. And now maybe you're setting some big goals, gigantic goals. How do you achieve them? Well, maybe this story called The Winding River would help you. Because I heard this story at a time in my life when I wasn't achieving my goals. I'd set a 1-year goal, a 5-year goal, and a 10-year goal. And Randy, you know what was happening? I wasn't making any progress at all, and I was so discouraged. And I went to the man who gave me the strangest secret, Vernon Cavill. And I said, Vernon, Earl Nightingale talked about goals, and I'm setting goals. And I'm frustrated. He said, what do you have? Well, I got a 1-year goal, I got a 5-year goal, I got a 10. He said, no, no, no. You need to hear the Winding River story. And here's what he said. As you're listening, picture yourself in a river. It's a winding snake-like river, and you're in a wooden boat, no engine, but it has a little tiller so you can give it some direction as the current is carrying you down this winding snake-like river. And Randy, since you're live with me, there's steep walled canyons on both sides of this river. And as the current is carrying you, Randy, down this river in this boat, how far ahead can you see?
Right, to the next
To the
curve or
next bend.
whatever.
When
Yeah,
you make the bend, how far can you see now?
to the next
To the
bend.
next bend. And he said, Joel, I'm in an airplane above the river. And as I look down at you, you're a young guy. You're in your 20s. The river is your life. So as you're listening to this, whatever age you are, the river is your life, and the boat is your present job or business or your experience. And as I look down at this long river ahead of you, at the end is a beautiful, placid lake. And you're going to make it to that beautiful, placid lake if you do three things starting right now. Now, as you're listening to the story, what's the question in your mind right now? Randy, tell them the question.
Yeah, you're thinking now, well, now you're starting to chunk down and think, oh, what could I do before the next bend in the river? What's an
So,
attainable, achievable, something I could get to?
all right. So, would you like to know the three things he said for the winding river?
Oh, yeah, love it.
Okay. Number one, he said, as you're listening, don't look back. The river of your life only goes forward, it doesn't go back. Learn from where you've been, but don't live there.
Hmm.
Focus ahead, not back. Second thing to do, focus on the boat. Focus on what you are doing now. Put everything that you've got into your present career, your present business, your present job assignment, whatever it is, and be amazing at that. And then you get lifted out. So many people I see are thinking, yeah, I'm going to do this, but I really want to go over there. And you don't put everything in. And then he said, look ahead, not back. Focus on what you're doing, put everything you've got into it, and never think of the next step in your career. It's going to happen automatic. If you do a great job what you're doing now, you'll be lifted out. And third, just make it to the next bend in the river. And I said to Vernon, I said, well, how far ahead is the bend? He said, why don't you say just 30 days? Instead of setting a yearly goal, a 5-year goal, and a 10-year goal, and thinking 10 years ahead, why don't you break that long goal into a small goal and think, okay, for the 1-year goal, what can I do in the next 30 days? You've heard that expression before. You can eat an elephant one bite at a time. Well, you can achieve big goals one step at a time. And Randy, when I heard that story, it was like the weight of the world was lifted off my shoulders. I didn't have to figure out my whole life. I didn't have to figure out how to get to the beautiful lake at the end of this winding river. I mean, I just turned 84. If anybody ever told me that at 84, I'd be just starting out thinking about all these things and using AI and having meta glasses on my bike ride this morning and doing all these wonderful things, I just feel like a kid in a candy store now.
All right,
But it
listen,
was
I
because of,
have to jump in with that because I was never going to let you off this podcast without talking about that. You're, by the way, just this latest episode of Tim Ferriss, our mutual acquaintance, Jack Canfield, is on Tim's pod this week. And Jack is 81 and still just razor sharp. Here you are, 84, razor sharp, physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally. What's the secret behind all that? Anyway, that everyone in the world wants to know. What the hell is Joel Weldon eating, drinking, doing to be living like that at 84?
well, on March 16th, 1981 was the day I'd started drinking only water and never another sweet. No candy, cookie, ice cream, cake, nothing. I was a sweetaholic. And I have a video on that, a life-changing experience on an airplane. A guy throwing my food on the floor and yelling at me got me to change everything I ate and drank in one day and
Wow.
never have had a sweet since that day in 1981. So eating right is number one, basic thing. But the most important thing is your thinking. Earl Nightingale said it in The Strangest Secret. You become what you think about. So, what are you thinking about? So, the number one suggestion, since we're on a completely different subject than the winding river, but to make it to that next bend in the river, break your goals down into small pieces. So, maybe you don't want to just say, I'm only going to drink water for the rest of my life. All right, how about for 30 days? Just try it and see what happens. And that's how I started. I did it for 30 days. And I felt so great. I said, I'm doing it again. And now it's been since 1981. So that's what, 44 years. The mindset is the key. And one little tool that you've heard as you're listening to this before, but it's so powerful. Control the controllables. I don't watch the news. I don't read a newspaper. I don't care about what's going on in politics. I voted. That's all I can do. I get one vote as an American citizen, and that's it. So I don't worry about what's going on because I can't control it. But what you can control is what you want to put your time, effort, and energy into. So those are the two most important things: what you eat, what you think. And then I work out a lot. I mean, I'm very physically active. And I water ski my age every year. I just made a video of 84 passes. We have a private water ski lake an hour from my home in Scottsdale. And it took me 2 hours and 5 minutes, never let go of the rope, and skied on a slalom course 84 times. And I started that when I was 70. And
Wow.
now I got 85 ready for next year. And you can do the same thing.
Yeah.
Watch what you eat, watch what you think, hang around with fit people. All my friends are young. I don't have any old people that I hang around with because they're all thinking about dying. So if you want to live a long,
I don't
happy
even
life,
hang
that's
around
a
with people
suggestion.
my age, and I'm like almost 20 years younger than you. And even people my age, they're too checked out. They're still, I literally 2 weeks ago I was on a softball field in the World Series
Yeah, I
with
know
my
you
team,
love the
right?
softball. Yeah.
Uh, so anyway, God bless you. I just love what you're doing with that. So listen, I know you have this, I think it's called the Ultimate Speaker System. I know a lot of the people who follow my work would find that really, really helpful for them to achieve the kind of goals they want to do with honing and developing their speaker skills. Can you tell them what that looks like?
Well, you can just go look at my website, ultimatespeaker.com. And there's a whole description of everything there. And basically, I've created a toolbox of videos, audios, printed materials, and then we add group coaching. So my daughters both work with me in our business. One is a professional speaker, Jenny, and she speaks all over, and she's a humorist, and how important humor is in your life. And we coach a lot of people one on one. I have a few that I work with because time is limited. So I have a one on one option, but then we have this group coaching thing, and it's a very reasonable investment. It's a 1 year program you can get in, 3,900 bucks, and it's worth like 6 grand. But we made a special for NSA people. And because you're NSA and this is your podcast, we pass that on to any of your listeners. So if this is interesting, you can just either get on that calendar on that website. There's my calendar link. Let's talk for 15 minutes if this sounds like something that could help you. And let's talk about it.
All right, we'll put that link in the show notes, everybody. So if you're driving, walking the dog, whatever, it'll be in the show notes. Uh, well, to kind of wrap it up, any final thoughts, anything you want to share with people?
Well, hopefully you got the idea of the winding river story, that not that you shouldn't have long range goals, but break them down so that they're doable and you get this tremendous satisfaction every month. I'm getting there now. Now let's sum up the speaking. In this toolbox, which I've created on page 148, are 22 words. And if I had to summarize everything in a career that's lasted 51 years and give you as a listener something that would help you be an even better communicator and speaker, here it is in 22 words. Are you ready? I'll do them slowly for you. Speak to your audience about what they need in an organized way they can follow, and get yourself out of the way. Randy?
Magnificent. My friend, thank you so much for making the time for this. It's, again, just a delight to have you on. You guys listening, watching, remember, get down, comment, like, share. If you're not a subscriber, hit the subscribe button. Mr. Weldon, it is an honor and a pleasure and I don't know what to say, just wonderful to connect with you. And I'm looking forward to seeing you next week and hanging out a little more.
All right. Well, make it a great day.
All right, everybody. Peace.